What's behind Pakistan's economic resurgence, and faced with serious security challenges, can it last? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. Here's what we know. Pakistan has seen its stocks soar, growth accelerate, currency stabilize, and foreign exchange reserves triple to a record in the last few years. And then there's China's investment, $46 billion in the 3,000-kilometer-long China-Pakistan economic corridor, part of the One Belt, One Road initiative. It's a remarkable economic turnaround, even as Pakistan faces ongoing security challenges from the Taliban and along its border with India. Later we'll go in depth with our panel, but we begin in Islamabad with CCTV's Daniel Khan. And Daniel, take us through some of the economic challenges Pakistan was facing and the progress that's been made.
Well, Anand, according to the experts here, Pakistan can become an economic hub if it realizes its geo-economic and strategic potential. But so far, it has been unable to realize these factors. Now, economic challenges in Pakistan are many. There is an insignificant exploration of resources that are in abundance in Pakistan. Trade is yet another sector in Pakistan that is being neglected and ignored. Thirdly, Pakistan has been hit with economic challenges due to the security situation for a long time. There is only a small scale development due to security issues. We know that foreign investors are reluctant to invest in Pakistan. Then there were natural disasters like the floods, and Pakistan lost millions of dollars worth of crop in 2010 and 11. And then the government failed to negotiate with political parties that caused political uncertainty in the past. But despite all these challenges, economy has progressed, and according to the Asian Development Bank, the GDP growth has accelerated from 3.6 in 2011 to almost 4.7 in 2016. The ADB has further raised the projection for growth in 2017. Yes.
All right, Daniel, let's talk about China's investment. How important is investment by China to Pakistan's economic growth?
Well, like you mentioned in your opening remarks, Anand, that out of the $46 billion investment from China, $35 billion are allocated for energy. A massive power crisis has hit the industry badly, forcing the Pakistani businessmen to invest in offshore companies. Taking the business out of Pakistan means a higher rate of unemployment. And Pakistan Industrial Hub was the city of Faisalabad, and many people have closed down their businesses in that city. There was a time Pakistan was one of the biggest exporters of cotton, but due to the power shortage, that time is long gone. But yes, with the arrival of CPEC and the revival of energy sector, the businessmen are hopeful that that this will greatly benefit the country's economy. Secondly, experts say that with the revival of industry, employment opportunities will also mushroom, and once that happens, they say that the security of the country will also improve. So yes, China's investment is of vital importance to Pakistan. Anand.
Thanks, Daniel. That's CCTV's Daniel Khan reporting from Islamabad. Okay, let's get to our panel. Joining us here in Washington is Moeed Yusuf. He's the Associate Vice President of the Asia Center at the United States Institute of Peace. Saurabh Gupta is a resident senior fellow at the Institute for China-America Studies. And joining us from Islamabad in Pakistan is the Executive Director of the Pakistan-China Institute, Mustafa Saeed. Welcome to all of you. So let's look at this project. It's a very big, ambitious project, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC as it's sometimes called. It will connect China's Xinjiang province to the rest of the world through the Pakistani port of Gwadar. Mustafa, how important is this corridor to Pakistan's economic growth?
Actually, you've asked the key question, and the feeling in the people of Pakistan and economists and the government is that this is going to be a game changer for Pakistan's economic growth, because it is going to address the energy crisis, the rapid industrialization through economic zones, and also connect Pakistan with Central Asia and the rest of the region. So a lot of hopes are pinned to this project, and already, as you know, Pakistan has been given a status of an emerging market from a frontier market, and our forex reserves have also substantially increased only in the past 2 years of the start of this project. And the shortfall of 5,000 megawatts, which is what is required to address the electricity problem, the lack of electricity, will also be addressed by 2018. So it's headed in the right direction, and a lot of priority is being given to this project across the political spectrum.
So, Moeed, a big spurt for Pakistan's economic growth here, and it's not just energy generation we're talking about the country's broad economic growth. It's one thing having Chinese investment coming in, $46 billion, Moeed, but what does Pakistan have to do?
It's a good question. Look, the whole idea behind CPEC, quite frankly, is strategic. It's economic, but there's a whole geopolitics angle to this, which we shouldn't forget. And I think what Pakistan has to do is really allow China that connection to import energy from the rest of the world, Africa included, which China is struggling now because of the South China Sea problem. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, I think it's that guarantee, it's that opening to China that the Chinese are going to look for desperately going forward, given that their situation in the South China Sea does not seem to be improving, and probably will not as China rises and competes with the US. So that's sort of the number one thing that the Chinese are expecting from Pakistan. On the technical side, it's really capacity. You know, it is all good to say, and I agree with Mustafa, this could be a potential game changer for Pakistan. I spent the whole summer there, and that's exactly how people are approaching this. The question is whether the economy and the institutions have the capacity to absorb $50 billion so quickly. This is not easy. It's 1/5 of Pakistan's GDP. And whether the institutions can cope with that, whether they can do it in a transparent manner and fulfill the requirements of, you know, getting these projects going on the ground with a lot of Chinese support and labor, I think that remains to be seen. But if they can get there, this could potentially be the sort of breaking of the logjam that Pakistan finds itself in economically, given that, you know, in terms of geopolitics, it's not really the most favored nation, if you will, around the world right now.
So, Rob, do you agree that, you know, this is about economic growth, but as Moeed points, big, strong geopolitical component to this, China's investment?
Yes, there is a very strong strategic dimension to this. But I would also add that just Pakistan standing up on its feet economically in a healthy way itself improves Pakistan's strategic situation and Pakistan's strategic standing. So to that extent, there is the strategic dimension, the geo-economic and the geopolitical dimensions are fused in this project. That is typically the case with these large infrastructure connectivity projects. And frankly, if we can have win-win gains from that process, and talking from an Indian perspective, to see Pakistan get its act in order economically is also a win-win proposition. So yes, there is strategic competition involved, and yes, there is a strategic component to this, but all of these point in a very favorable direction from a sub-regional and a regional point of perspective.
Right, and so how important is this project to China's overall One Belt, One Road strategy?
I think it is very important simply because the projects in Pakistan are the ones which are the quickest to be realized, actualized. You know, the Belt and Road Initiative is still is still more conceptual than actually rolled out on the ground. In Pakistan, we have the opportunity where these projects actually come to fruition and come to fruition early. It becomes important from that perspective because there are all variety of criticisms against the Belt and Road, often from people who would not like it to succeed, but the sort of complaints that what are the environmental standards, what are the assessments being made, etc., etc. Right. So from that perspective, if it rolls out early and these are done in a green, lean, and clean manner, it'll add it'll add to the image of how Obar is perceived in the world.
Okay, Mustafa, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of these projects. You know, the thing is, how will it affect normal people, real people. Pakistan has a population, 30% of which are young adults. This is the future of Pakistan. These are the people who are going to make the future of Pakistan.
Sure.
How is it going to change their lives?
Yes. You see, you have to put it into context. As some of the other colleagues just said, that it's part of the One Belt, One Road. And in the One Belt, One Road, but the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is the pilot project of China in any country. And a lot of the early harvest projects, which are the first phase of the 14 projects, some of them have already reached financial close, which is a good indicator for the start of 2 years. So this is already being forecasted to create multiple jobs, as the energy projects and the construction projects have coupled with them vocational training institutes, universities, and knowledge corridors, which will provide a lot of jobs in different arenas to engineers, to doctors, to young professionals, to teachers, and also to students to study in the neighboring regional countries. So it's a sort of a pan-regionalism which is emerging from Pakistan. And an interesting development which has been very recent is that Turkey, Iran, and Kazakhstan have also showed their interest officially to be part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So there's a sort of a greater South Asia, if you will, which is emerging. And a lot of jobs have already been created in the existing projects which has started. And people have already started learning a lot of Chinese and are now applying for universities. Young people are applying for universities in the country. So there's this whole buzz in the air, so to speak. And the benefits of that are, some are immediate and some are slightly more long-term, since the project is aimed to complete till 2030. So it's in 3 phases, and we have to look at it holistically.
If I may add, I think that's exactly right, and there's a lot of exuberance on the street in Pakistan. First sort of Urdu paper has also gone Chinese, and so there are things happening. That's for sure. 2 things I'll say. One, I think the real sustainable part of job creation and economic development, apart from this mega infrastructure and energy, is going to be the local economies that develop around this infrastructure. And I think that's a whole different project which has to be done within Pakistan. What kind of economies spring up along roads, along these projects?
That's where your job creation is going to come.
I think that's really the sustainable part of it. I mean, this is going to last till whenever, but how can you actually sustain this? That question needs to be asked more. But let me also add that the real elephant in the room here still remains the India-Pakistan relationship. When we talk about a larger South Asia, a pan-regional kind of approach, unfortunately, you're still talking of a north-south corridor. And the India-Pakistan tensions and the relationship where it is, we've just had a cancellation of the SAARC summit, which is the South Asian regional cooperation body. Unless that equation gets settled over time, over this 15-year period, I'm afraid no project is going to get to its optimal results. It's still going to be very good for Pakistan, for China, for the region. But I think that elephant in the room, if we don't address that, if that can get kicked down the road every single time, I think South Asians are going to lose at the end of the day.
If I can just make one remark here, that I totally agree that definitely Pakistan-India relations will impact, if they head in the right direction, will definitely impact it positively. But given that the regional countries, neighboring countries have expressed their interest to join the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Pakistan and China have made it clear that this is not an exclusive project, or it's not just a bilateral project, but it's a multilateral project, and all the neighboring countries are most welcome to be part of it and join it to increase the connectivity, because it will be win-win. So I think that it would be definitely very good for India to be part of it and to view it as a project which will be a force multiplier for India's progress rather than a threat.
That's great. Yeah, Saurabh, it's a big project, as I mentioned. When Chinese economic planners look at something like this, when they look at what their investment is going to mean to another country, what are we talking about? Are we talking about getting raw materials out of the country, getting goods moving across, getting labor moving across? What exactly is this money being invested in?
The Chinese have framed the Belt and Road Initiative in a very grand way and in a very loose and flexible way. So it can include all sorts of, all factors of production process. The main goal, as I understand, is to create those linkages, those connectivity linkages. And those connectivity linkages could then, as has been mentioned, then be the basis for creating urban hubs or semi-urban hubs or industrial parks or manufacturing zones. We've already actually, this is not a completely new concept. You know, in India itself, Japan and India have what is called a Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor. And the whole purpose of that is to link two big industrial areas which goes through a part of the country which is very dynamic, and create coastal manufacturing zones which will then reach out to export markets.
So now in Pakistan we're talking about this corridor which will actually open up the hinterland as well.
Yeah,
develop
absolutely.
That area. Yeah.
It'll open up the hinterland, and that's why it is these logistical connections which are very important. Of course, it goes beyond that. There is going to be just power production and just some basics, but Pakistan and India is lacking in many of those basics. And so from that fundamental perspective, this is a transformational project, not just for Pakistan. As I see it, this is one of the great transformational projects that is happening over the past 50 years. We had, at the end of the Second World War, we had a new liberal international trading order created. In the 1970s and 80s, we had Japanese outward direct investment in labor-intensive manufacturing going to export markets. Pakistan and India both missed the bus on both of those. It's time to get on the bus this time.
Right. Very quickly, before we go to break, Sohrab, what about Mustafa's point that this could be a win for India as well, notwithstanding that these two countries do have political issues?
Oh, absolutely, it can be a win, and I would hope that, when Modi came into office, he was talking in terms of cross-border connectivity linkages. That was one of the mantras. He had been to China many times, and he did not have the insecurities that many of the Indian elites had against China. But things have subsequently gone backwards, and we can expand on this greater in the second section. Okay. But absolutely, the connectivity linkages, east-west connectivity linkages, are waiting to be created.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break right now. More of our conversation when we return. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat. Welcome back. We're talking about Pakistan's economic recovery. Let's get back to our panel right now. Mustafa, Pakistan is going through changing times right now, changing economy right now. If we look at the country's textile industry, it's been hurt by the fact that you've had an energy problem in Pakistan. A lot of those textile factories that were in Pakistan have now moved to other countries. They've moved to Bangladesh. They've moved to Vietnam. Can Pakistan regenerate, get those industries back?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, that energy was a big problem for Pakistan's economy, and $35 billion out of the $46 billion is energy investment, pure energy investment in hydropower, in wind, in solar, in liquefied natural gas, and some ultra supercritical technology of coal. So the lion's share of the China-Pakistan economic corridor is all energy projects, in fact, and the rest of the $11 billion are infrastructure. So these, all of these industries which have gone outside of Pakistan, and understandably so, will definitely come back. And to supplement the energy projects and the energy that is going to be provided, the economic zones, the special economic zones, which are going to be set up and which will be given giving investors tax holidays and exemptions and other incentives, will really encourage both Pakistani and Chinese and other international investors to set up their manufacturing units in Pakistan. In Gwadar already there is a special economic zone under construction as we speak, and in the rest of Pakistan as well, they will be in the second phase. So they will get market access to Europe, to Central Asia, to China, to vice versa. So, and you have to see that Gwadar is going to play a pivotal role for the manufacturing units and for trade, and giving China access to the warm waters. So it actually, why it distinguishes itself from the rest of the ports in the world is because it's part and parcel of the maritime Silk Road as well as the land route of the Silk Road. So the two maritime and the land route converge in Gwadar. And I think that is what is going to be what I earlier called the game changer.
So, if we look at Pakistan, it's facing enormous political challenges, the relationship with its neighbor, India, the relationship with the United States. What do you make of President Nawaz Sharif's stewardship of the economy?
Look, I mean, Prime Minister Sharif has been sort of business-oriented. This is his, third time in office, and he's always known as somebody who's very friendly to the industry, to business, to export. And in fact, if you remember when he came into office, he made a big push to open up with India. I mean, there were conversations about a most favored nation status to India and then opening up trade. So he's always been on that line. And I think his vision, if I may say, from people around him as well, is really a connected South Asia and Pakistan connected within. There's always this conversation and worry about Pakistan's isolation and how to break through that if relations with India and the US and others are not good. And the Chinese, the CPEC is probably one big transformational part of that, but he's very much committed to that. In fact, I know that he's probably, personally very disappointed with this relationship, the Indian relationship taking sort of a backward trend, if you will, in terms of Modi and Nawaz Sharif developing an equation, the media talking about them being two leaders who could come together, and then it all falling apart and being pretty nasty over the past 2 or 3 months. So I think he's committed to this. There is an opening there, but quite frankly, I will say, as much as we talk about India, Pakistan and rationality and could be a win-win, these two states have missed no opportunity to actually lose out on that advantage of coming together and bringing the region as a whole, and quite frankly hurting the smaller countries of the region in the process. And I unfortunately don't see that changing anytime soon.
So, Rob, what do you think? If Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, I elevated him to President just now, he is the Prime Minister.
That would be a demotion in the Pakistani system. He's happier being the Prime Minister.
If he reaches out to India, will India, with good intentions, will India reciprocate?
Not as the current security setup in India is constituted. I think Nawaz Sharif has gone out of his way anyways to make up to India and to telegraph his intentions to India. There is a fear that he cannot yet bring his army along or his armed forces along to, at least to its satisfaction. So the purpose at this point of time is not to rush that relationship into a relationship of friendship. There are serious issues which need to be tackled. Let them tackle the issues as they stand, the issues of terrorism, cross-border violence, etc., and gradually, as they can find mechanisms to deal with them, then we can think of, from a political perspective, think of broader opportunities which can be capitalized, political opportunities. But that having been said, I see no reason why, from a geo-economic perspective, the Indians would not want to shape the contours of the Maritime Silk Road and OBOR, the Belt and Road Initiative in South Asia, and make them complementary to its own neighborhood policy. There's a lot of money being put in out here. India is not in a position or capacity to put those sort of funds out. So try to work with the Chinese to shape those contours and try to build complementary linkages. And it's not just about India and Pakistan, it's about linking Afghanistan and Pakistan together, because it's high time that many of the quarrels will go on for a long time, but you can create underlying economic capacities which join the destinies of the nation together, so that when the politics does get right, I mean, there can be the region can really prosper.
Mustafa, we talked about the role that India is playing, that China is playing. Who are the other major foreign players in Pakistan's economy?
You see, Afghanistan, Iran, and some of the Central Asian states, Turkey, as I already have said, interested in investing and coming into Pakistan and synergizing with Chinese, Pakistani, and their own companies. So I think all of these countries are playing a very important role, and I think most importantly Afghanistan and Iran, because they neighbor with Pakistan, And I think they're playing a very positive role. And in fact, now we are talking about the Chabahar port and the Gwadar ports cooperation. So cooperation rather than competition. And this time when our Prime Minister was in the United Nations, the Iranian President and our Prime Minister agreed to work collectively to develop their ports jointly and to welcome Iran into the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So there's a lot of hope regionally and interest which has been demonstrated by countries, and it has a both strategic context as well as a purely economic one, because it will give a lot of economic dividends to these struggling economies, whether it's Iran, whether it's Afghanistan. It will provide jobs to their people and will sort of provide a new opportunity, a new block which will be integrated, less formally so than the EU, but something like that is emerging, and we can see that happening in Pakistan right now. And another thing that we have to keep in mind is that the $46 billion pledge of investment in Pakistan is the biggest pledge of investment by any one country into another country in recent history. And I think all of the neighboring countries have taken cognizance of that and have, in a timely manner, thrown their hat in the ring. So I think all of the neighboring countries can play a very key role in it, and I think they are going to play a key role.
Go ahead, sir.
Just one further point I wanted to add to that is talking beyond countries.
Yeah.
You know, the United States has taken a fairly cusset view of both the Belt and Road Initiative and the AIIB, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. US private companies haven't. They've not taken that sort of view as the public sector. They are pretty gung-ho on this. People like GE, people like Bechtel, they see huge opportunities. They are into infrastructure, and they're seeing people who are ready to deliver funds, not just talk about it. So US private sector is actually, these large infrastructure firms who are in that space are fairly enthusiastic about this. So one should not just limit it just purely from a country in terms of states. We have to look at the private sector too.
Okay, thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CCTV America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on Twitter at CCTV_America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.